Can weightlifting actually add years to your life? Well, studies have shown that any type and any amount of resistance training actually lower your risk of death by 15%. But what if we could perform our training in an optimal way to reduce our risk of death even further? In other words, what if by performing the right exercises the right way, we could achieve closer to a 50 to 75% lower risk of death from just resistance training? Well, as a licensed medical doctor and certified strength and conditioning specialist, I'm here to show you how to do just that. And to do so, we have to answer three main questions. One, what are the key principles of a training program that maximize longevity? Two, what are the strength and conditioning markers that are actually linked to a longer, healthier life? And three, finally, what are the top 5 exercises that actually target these strength markers and these principles? Well, let's find out. First, let's talk about the key principles of a training program that actually allow for improved longevity. The first is that intensity is much more important than volume. Intensity is basically defined as how heavy are you lifting compared to your 1 rep max, or occasionally defined as rate of perceived exhaustion, or RPE. Multiple studies have demonstrated that a higher intensity is much more important than a higher volume of training when it comes to reducing the risk of all causes of death. So the takeaway here is we need to train heavy and at least train closer to exhaustion or at a high RPE if we really want to maximize our longevity. And this goes hand in hand with the next key principle of training for longevity, and that is that strength is much more important than size or muscle mass. This is first demonstrated by the fact that strength is much more linked to a lower risk of all causes of death compared to muscle mass. One study demonstrated, for instance, that for each standard deviation increase in quad strength, there was a 51% lower risk of death in males and a 65% lower risk of death in females. But that same study demonstrated that an increase in muscle mass did not correlate with any decrease in risk of death. And multiple other studies have continually demonstrated that a high level of strength is associated with a lower risk of death. However, muscle mass does not tend to show that same effect. Secondly, the importance of strength over muscle mass is demonstrated by the fact that we lose strength with age much faster than we do muscle mass. One specific study demonstrated that participants lost their leg strength at a rate of 3% per year compared to only losing their muscle mass in their legs by 1% per year. So if we lose strength 3 times faster than we do muscle mass, and strength is much more correlated with prolonging life, we really need to focus our exercises on building strength instead of building muscle mass. However, there is something that's even more important than strength, and that is power. Power is basically our ability to generate force very quickly, compared to strength, which is producing a maximal force, but very slowly. Multiple studies demonstrate that we lose power with age even faster than we lose strength. So we really need to focus on maintaining our power as we age for longevity. And other studies demonstrate that power is more associated with functional ability and mobility as we age. Thus, again, showing us the importance of training for power for longevity, and also hinting at the next key principle of any training program that is focusing on longevity, and that is functional strength training. Functional strength training is essentially focusing on exercises that mimic everyday activities in everyday life. The studies are very clear that those who can complete their activities of daily living, or ADLs, and those that are more mobile live longer, healthier lives. Specifically, the studies note that those who cannot complete their activities of daily life live 5 years less than those who can. And those that are immobile live 1 year less than those who have great mobility. So it makes sense that we should be prioritizing exercises that allow us to be more mobile and just complete activities of our daily life. And this is where functional strength training really shines, and that is the principle of specificity. Essentially training that closely mirrors the activities that we are training for. So for longevity's sake, that means including exercises that closely mimic the activities and the movements of everyday life. So now we know that we need to be selecting exercises that allow us to prioritize intensity, functional ability, power over strength, and strength over size. But we still need one key piece of information to finally select those top 5 exercises. And that is, what are the key strength markers that are associated with longevity? Then, after knowing these markers and the principles that we just talked about, we can reverse engineer the top 5 exercises that you need to be including for longevity. The first most obvious marker of strength that's associated with longer life is total overall body strength. And multiple studies have demonstrated how higher total strength results in lower risk of all causes of death. So it's going to make sense in our training program to include exercises that give us the most bang for the buck. Those compound exercises that build total body strength the best instead of isolating one individual body part. The next marker is probably the most studied when it comes to its effect on longevity, and that is grip strength. Studies have shown that if you're in the top third of people in regards to grip strength compared to the bottom third of people, you have a 53 to 74% lower risk of death from all causes, which is super significant. Now, no studies that I could find prove that grip strength is an independent marker of longevity. I.e., no studies prove that it's the grip strength alone that provides the longer life, compared to, is grip strength just more a marker of total overall upper body strength, and that's actually what provides the increased longevity. But to me, there's enough data on grip strength to really include it in our training regimen. And grip strength is also very functional. You have to carry things as you age, and being able to do so gracefully will definitely provide better longevity and better health span. So I think for that reason alone, even, it's great to think about when selecting our top exercises for longevity. The second most commonly tested marker of strength for longevity is leg extension strength. Specifically, studies demonstrate that being in the highest category for leg extension strength compared to the lowest results in a 14% lower risk of all causes of death. There are also studies that demonstrate that for every 15 Newton increase in leg extension strength, you get a 7% lower risk of death. Now, similar to grip strength, there are no specific studies that demonstrate that leg extension strength is an independent marker for longevity, meaning maybe it's just lower body strength in general is actually the marker for longevity, but it's just harder to test that. So that being said, I do still think that the amount of studies on leg extension strength compared to any upper body strength measures really hint at the point that lower body strength is probably more important than upper body strength for longevity, which just makes sense functionally as well. So for that reason, when I'm selecting those top 5 exercises, I'm going to more prioritize lower body exercises compared to upper body exercises. The next marker of strength and conditioning associated with a longer life is balance. Studies have shown that those that cannot complete a one-leg balance test for 10 seconds have an 84% higher risk of death from all causes. And each 1 second longer that you're able to stand on one leg in balance, you get a 10% lower risk of death from all causes. And this totally makes sense because balance is super functional. If you can't balance and stabilize yourself, you're more likely to fall in everyday life or not be able to go across difficult terrain. So it's super important for us to include balance training and stability training in our top 5 exercises. The last main marker of strength and conditioning that's associated with longevity is the timed up and go test, or the sitting rising test. Essentially, how quick are you able to go from a seated position to a standing position and move? Studies have shown that those that are the slowest in the timed up and go test compared to those that are the fastest in the time up and go test have a 79% increased risk of death from all causes. And other studies have demonstrated that for each unit increase in speed on the sitting to rising test, you get a 21% decreased risk of death from all causes. And this marker, again, really speaks to the importance of power. How quick can we generate force in stand up and go? And again, also focusing on functional strength and specifically that leg strength. So that leaves us with needing to train for increasing total body strength, grip strength, leg extension strength, balance, and leg power and mobility. And also needing to focus on power, intensity, and functionality. With all those markers and all those principles, I'm sure you could come up with a bunch of exercises that allow you to add years to your life. But here, without further ado, are my top 5 exercises for adding years to your life. And if I don't include your favorites for adding years to your life, then drop yours in the comments below because I'd love to add them to my routine. Coming in at number 5 is pull-ups. And this means assisted all the way up to weighted pull-ups. The reasons to include pull-ups on this list are 1, great at improving grip strength. 2, are probably the most functional upper body exercise. It really involves a lot of core and stabilization to pull yourself up compared to a bench press or a lat pull down in which you're more stabilized already by a flat bench and don't need to involve all these extra muscles. Also, I include pull-ups here compared to a pushing exercise for the upper body because pulling is much more functional in your everyday life compared to pushing. You're much more likely to need to pull yourself up or climb a ladder or open a heavy door compared to having to push a heavy object. That's why pull-ups are great and very functional here as well. However, what are some alternatives to maybe give you a good switch up from this exercise, but still work on a lot of the same intangibles for longevity? And I'll do this for each of the top 5 exercises, but for pull-ups, one would be inverted rows. Inverted rows still allow you to activate your core and stabilizer muscles, although maybe a little bit less than a pull-up, and they're a little bit more rhomboid heavy compared to the lat heavy pull-ups. However, a great exercise to throw in on occasion. Or if pull-ups are a little bit too challenging for you and you don't have access to an assisted machine. And a second alternate is renegade rows. This one probably even more core and stabilizer muscle activation compared to a pull-up, so are a great alternative to throw in every once in a while. Coming in at number 4 is dumbbell step-ups. I included these because they are super applicable to that timed up and go test and our balance test, 2 of our really important markers for longevity. They'll also allow you to work on grip strength by holding those dumbbells, and they can be performed for power as well if you really focus on exploding up to the top of the movement. And again, super functional. Think about walking upstairs or hiking, walking across a difficult terrain and maintaining your balance. This exercise is super functional for those activities and is still working on building total body strength and specifically building that leg extension strength and leg power in general. A couple alternates for this one would be walking lunges. A little bit less focus on balance, but still very functional now over a different terrain, mimicking just walking over a flat surface with a load in hand. And 2 would be Bulgarian split squats. This one is more quad focused, so even more focused on that leg extension strength, which could be a good thing, and works through a greater range of motion, which is great for mobility. So this would be a great one to add in. The reason it didn't beat the dumbbell step-ups though is it's just a little less functional in nature. Number 3 is suitcase carries. It's great at grip strength. Probably the best exercise you can do on this list, especially for improving grip strength. And it's super functional for leg strength as well, having to walk that long distance with an unbalanced load. And the fact that you are unbalanced, aka are only holding the load on one side, really allows you to activate your core and stabilizing muscles even more than you would the first alternative to this exercise, which would be farmer's carries. And farmer's carries are a great idea to include as well, especially for that grip strength and again, that functional movement of carrying a heavy load. But I really value the unilateral loading of suitcase carries, and that's why I chose it as the top exercise here. However, farmer's carries do beat it out in their ability to load the exercise heavier, aka double the amount, and really improve total body strength probably more. The second alternative for suitcase carries would be a front rack carry. This one less focuses on grip strength, but is still a great functional exercise and just loaded in a different way to allow for even more trunk and core stability while focusing less on grip strength. Coming in at number 2 is dumbbell jump squats. And these are the pro exercise at working on intensity and power, those 2 training principles that are super important for longevity. It's probably the best exercise I do for increasing lower body power, which is super important for that timed up and go test, for instance. This exercise is also great at promoting balance, another one of our key strength markers, and it'll still allow you to work on grip strength slightly due to the load being the dumbbells in your hands. The alternates for this one would be 1, a barbell back squat. Highly recommend that you include this as a switch up. The reason it didn't get on the top 5 list is because it focuses less on power than a dumbbell jump squat, for instance. However, there are a bunch of benefits for the barbell back squat as well, including probably more increased total body strength compared to the jump squat, and a different spinal trunk loading that will also allow for higher core engagement as well. And it's still pretty functional. Think about, again, getting up from a chair. It still is applicable to that timed up and go test, just slightly less so because it less is focused on power and more on strength. And the second alternate is kettlebell swings. This one very focused on power still, but a little bit less functional compared to the dumbbell jump squats. That being said, a great alternate to include because it focuses more on the posterior chain or the glutes and the hamstrings compared to the more quad-centric and glute focus of the dumbbell jump squats. And it will also allow you to focus on hip mobility, which is super important for longevity as well. And coming in at number 1, speaking of hip mobility and the posterior chain, it is sumo deadlift. My number one exercise for longevity for multiple reasons. One, it's the best exercise for building total body strength. Two, it's extremely functional. Think about just picking up heavy objects. That is a thing that you'll have to do throughout the rest of your life. Three, it focuses on grip strength. Four, it focuses obviously on a lot of leg strength. And five, it's also functional for increasing that timed up and go test or your balance test, and essentially just working on leg power and leg functionality in general. And the alternates are the different types of deadlift: conventional deadlift and trap bar deadlift. I chose sumo over conventional because sumo is a little bit safer to perform. It loads the trunk in a way that allows for less risk of rounding, and it also focuses a little bit more on leg strength, which I deem to be a little bit more important for longevity, compared to the conventional deadlift, which focuses a little bit more on lower back strength. However, again, conventional deadlift is an alternate. You should definitely do it if you feel comfortable doing it, as it will definitely improve your stability and your trunk and core strength in general. And for your second alternative, trap bar deadlift. It's going to be more quad focused compared to the sumo deadlift, and it's even safer than the sumo. However, I chose the sumo as number one because I felt it was a good happy medium of getting some core and trunk stability work while still being safe. But again, trap bar deadlift, a great way to work on quads and still increase that total body strength. So a great switch up to sumo every once in a while. So these are the exercises you need to be including in your training regimen if you're looking to optimize your longevity. However, how do we actually perform these exercises, and how do we set up our training regimen to actually promote optimal longevity with these exercises? AKA, what are the sets, the reps, the rest periods, etc., that will really add years to your life? Well, the first thing we have to talk about here is, again, prioritizing power and strength over muscle mass. And what this means practically is we need to perform less than 6 reps for strength and less than 5 reps for power. Because I also really want to focus on injury prevention here as well for longevity purposes, I like to stick closer to the 6 rep range for strength and the 5 rep range for power, compared to the 1 to 3 reps in which you're lifting even heavier weight and are at more risk for injury. I feel the 5 or 6 rep range is a good happy medium between still promoting strength and power and high intensity while also lifting injury free. And when you're lifting these heavier loads, you also need to have longer rest periods so that you can then perform the next set with high intensity and high power. So for these 5 to 6 rep range sets, you need to be having about a 2-minute rest period in between sets, and then performing about 3 to 5 sets per exercise. And outside of just focusing on power and strength, again, we have to focus on intensity. And what does that mean practically? It means train heavy. So when you're training for strength, when you get to the 6th rep, you should not be able to complete any more reps, or at least only able to complete 1 or 2 more. That's basically means you're going to be choosing a weight that is 85%-ish of your 1 rep max for those 6 reps. And for power, on that 5th rep, you should be noticing that you can no longer produce the same amount of speed that you did on the 1st rep. And you should be selecting a weight that will allow you to do so, or probably about 70% of your 1 rep max. And also, to focus on intensity, it's super important that we focus on progressive overload. Essentially, as you do these exercises more and more, the weight that you used to only be able to do 6 reps on, you'll probably be able to do 10 or 12 reps on. Well, when that happens, you need to increase your weight. So again, you could only do 6 reps of that exercise. Essentially, you need to keep giving your muscles new stimulus to grow, and you can do that by increasing your weight. So 3 to 5 sets per exercise, 5 to 6 reps, depending on if you're focusing on strength or power, and 2-minute rests in between sets. And train heavy with progressive overload. Now, it is important to switch up your training style every once in a while to, again, give your muscles new stimulus to grow. However, this way of training should be a staple for you that you keep coming back to if you want to focus on adding years to your life. My hope is that with all this information, you are armed to create a training program that will add years to your life and add life to those years. And if you want to know the top 5 supplements that can do the same thing, watch this video next.